Okay, hi everybody. We're here today with Beth Ohanneson, who is a licensed marriage and family therapist in the San Francisco area. And she has come to specialize in working with parents of children who have sensory processing and integration challenges. Beth and I actually got to know each other a little bit through the STAR Symposium last year because she brought some really interesting survey data that she had collected that she is now in the process of working up a manuscript that we hope for publication. So I really invited her here today for two reasons. One, to talk a little bit about this research that she conducted, but also more broadly for us to understand the nature of her intervention and the principles I think that underlie and guide the way she works with families. So welcome, Beth. And why don't you just start by telling us a little bit about yourself and how you got involved in the field and in this specialty?
Okay. Well, thank you, Sarah, for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here talking with parents and occupational therapists. This work is very near and dear to my heart because not only am I a licensed marriage and family therapist, but I'm also a mother of two wonderful kids, one of whom is a young adult now, a girl with sensory processing differences. So I have really lived it from the inside out, and it has been very gratifying to be able to work with other parents and share with them what I learned being a mother of a sensory child and how I feel it's gone well, and really very concrete tools that I use especially during the dark years.
Yeah.
um, so in addition to being a licensed marriage and family therapist and a mother of a child with sensory issues, I'm also a certified parenting instructor through Hand in Hand Parenting, which is a nonprofit organization that's over 30 years old. It's started by Patty Whipfler. It's based in Palo Alto, California, and they now have instructors really all over the world. And so these tools come from that, that group, Hand in Hand Parenting. And just to let all of the people who are listening know that there's a lot of free information on the Hand in Hand Parenting website. They have a parent club that's heavily moderated, so people are really responded to by other certified instructors through Hand in Hand Parenting, some of whom have kids with differences,
Mhm.
not all. This is not a group or a theory that's geared specifically towards kids with differences, but you'll see as I talk about the tools how easy it is to modify or individualize the tools for kids with sensory challenges.
Yeah, that would be great. I wonder if you want to give us some of the either a global perspective on it and then dig into some of the real strategies that are unique to this approach.
Okay, so kind of the big picture about this parenting approach is and it really starts with there are four main ideas. One is that parenting is hard, and parents deserve a lot of support and intelligent thought and care around their work in order to be able to stay fresh and parent well.
Hmm.
So that's the first thing. Um, the next thing is that children are born to really neurologically born to connect with their parents. It's how they develop their attachment relationships, which are the template for getting along well with others and enables them to be at their best for learning and behaving at their best. Um, the third thing is that when children don't feel connected with a primary person or a trusted person in their environment, they will show us that they don't feel stable, they don't feel comfortable, with their behaviors and their emotions. And so that's how we are interpreting children's big emotions and their off-track behaviors is that it's their best effort in the moment to let us know that they're confused or they're suffering or they need connection with a trusted adult.
Right.
Um, And then the fourth thing is that by fostering play, through play and laughter, and setting limits without harshness, but with compassion and listening well and good containment, that children, this is how children learn to feel securely attached. So those are the kind of the overarching principles, and the things that I think are particularly unique are that is the care for parents in the equation of families, rather than, with a focus on children, really putting parents kind of in the center, because they're the ones that are nourishing the kids. And the next one, again, just to underscore it, is that emotions are valued and cared for, rather than um, seem to be quieted, and behaviors seem to be uh, managed. So we're not teaching to so much. It's not really about teaching. It's really more about containment and attachment.
So I just wanted to highlight one of the things that you said, and I know you're going to even further elaborate, but I think that occupational therapists oftentimes get stuck on a child's behavior from the perspective of, is it due to their sensory processing differences?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and how to manage that in a therapeutic setting, because we work with parents too, obviously not in the same manner, but I think in many ways occupational therapists have to model sort of some of the interactions that we want to see parents engage in with their children.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason why I'm bringing up that particular observation is that, we always, or certainly I think, and I hope you would agree, that any behavior that the child displays is communicating something important that the child needs. And yes, it may not be specific to sensory, but sensory is sort of underlying every behavior. And a negative association could have been initially because of a sensory trigger, but now it's become a behavior that is communicating a need that the child has, that we, and certainly the parent, has to learn how to read and interpret so that they can know how to satisfy that. Or is that
I
getting
agree
on the
with
right track?
Yes, I agree with everything that you said. And I mean, this is why, for us, as speaking as a parent now, how the occupational therapists in our lives have been the crucial anchor in helping us understand if, when our children have behaviors or emotional responses that are so loud and so long, that they're really outside the norm of what we see other families experiencing.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I remember that feeling of standing on the sidewalk with my occupational therapist after a session with my daughter. And, my daughter had gone into the car with my husband and they were fine. And I have my back to them and I'm speaking with my beloved OT, just really sobbing, trying to understand, she does this and she does that. And I don't understand when this happens. And for her to give me those new ideas was just, it was a true lifeline. And it really helped me expand how to appreciate her, how to slow down my expectations. Meanwhile, she has another mom with another child coming at her on the sidewalk, and she can't spend all that amount of time with me, right? She's got to take the
Right.
next child in.
Which is why she needs you to be a part of it so that you embody those that understanding and whatever tools that are offered so that you can be independent of her as well, right?
Absolutely. She needs me to carry it forward in my home.
Yeah.
But I think, what I also want to underscore here is that there's only so much time she could give me in that 5-minute transition. And I think that was a gap that I, as a parent, felt. And as a healthcare, as a mental health care professional, I wanted to start to expand that offering in my community so that she ultimately could refer to me and say, this is where you can go. Since I don't have all the time to integrate all this information, go over here. You can do groups based in the hand-in-hand strategy with Beth. That was very helpful to have groups of parents so that generally it was the moms, but sometimes dads
Mm-hmm.
would feel like they weren't the only ones in the universe to have a child who was responding differently. but so that the load wasn't so much on the occupational therapist. Once we got into, okay, we have an understanding here of what's going on with the child, with continual feed, not continual, but enough feed from the occupational therapist. And now as a group over here doing the mental health work, parents could cry, they could mourn the loss of the child they didn't have. We really worked on each one of these tools, which I'll detail for you, about how to build connection up front, so
Mhm.
that when either limits need to be set for off-track behavior, or just those long periods of time when a child is hooked into sensory over-responsivity and they're just on the floor screaming, and they look like they're in agony, and I believe that they probably are. Um, how hard that is on the parents. So um, that really does feel a huge need, and it's one of the things that's so exceptional about the Star Center's model, is to really make sure that all the parents are in, not only on receiving information about their child from the occupational therapist, but really that there's the mental health team to go to kind of fall apart and just say how hard it is.
Yeah, because it really is something that impacts the whole family. It's not just the child, and we're not trying to fix the child. We're really trying to build the foundational relationships, as you said. I mean, I think attachment is a huge, huge piece of what has to get repaired
Mhm.
in that relationship, that supports the child being even able to master whatever the future challenges are, whether they're emotional, cognitive, attentive, sensory. I think it is that primary caregiver, or caregivers, that are that support moving forward in the world.
Mhm.
Uh,
Right.
so and I guess my point was is that, as you're saying, the occupational therapist can and is the key person to help in relationship to the strategies, understanding these sensory pieces, and more globally how it's affecting regulation and relationships within the family. But what you're doing is you're giving space for the parents to actually explore their own emotional side to dealing with a child who has these differences, but also what it probably brings up in themselves as well, or in their other relationships within the family.
Right. So both of those things that you identified the two important things. One is that if the parents have their own process of their child's emotional responses, the sound of their child crying will necessarily remind them of whether or not they were attended to or not when they were a child. And so it's been very interesting over the last decade to talk to so many parents and see how some are quite comfortable when their child cries and
Hmm.
some are not. It's really unbearable because they never received enough time to feel cared for when they were in distress for
Hmm.
whatever reason. So
Right.
that goes much more towards the work of a longer term therapy. But in the work of particularly the hand in hand parenting groups, the structure of those groups is that um, each participant each time receives individual time to talk, to kind of offload their feelings and their emotions about how the week has been, and often to connect it. It's spontaneous, often connecting it with a memory of something that went well or didn't go well when they were a child.
Hmm.
And so this kind of starts to really clear the path for them returning home to be fresh and resilient with their own children and their own family. So that emotional support is one distinct component, and it's actually one of the tools that
Uh-huh.
we support parents to do what we call listening partnerships, so that it's not only coming to a hand-in-hand instructor or a therapist like me doing groups in my office, but they can set up listening partnerships that are very structured actually, and exchange listening time. so that they even can build broader support systems for the work going forward over time.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a good example of how hand-in-hand parenting puts parents really in the center of it in terms of their need for support going forward.
Right.
Um,
What are some of
so
the other features of the program?
so so the other four tools are there are two tools that are geared towards proactively building connection up front with children, parents. The other four are parent to child. So the first one let's talk about is we call special time. And special time is also structured. There's a beginning and an end to it, and it's really a version of child therapy in the sense that the parent is tuning into the child with warmth and joy, and the child leads the activity, and basically whatever the child chooses, the parent is consciously thrilled with it, just is remembering that they got into the whole work of parenting in the first place because they wanted to receive this beautiful child. So it demedicalizes the relationship. It's so easy for one's child to become kind of a medical project when there are so many things to assess and treatments to go to and so forth. So we kind of separate that out, and I am here loving you as you are. You are my one and only child, and you're the one that I wanted. That's kind of the feeling of it.
Mm-hmm.
And so that kind of fills up the reservoir of connection between parent and child, and reminds them, I am here for you. So attachment is really about safety. I see you, I care about you, I love you just the way you are, and we're good together. Okay. So then another tool, crucial, is we call stay listening. And this is really, honestly, this is a paradigm shift in the world of branded parenting strategies.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So this is where, I'll bring in a little vignette here. Say a fire truck goes by, the siren is loud, all the other kids go like this, but my sensory child drops to the floor and is panicking for 45 minutes. And she's suffering, she's angry at me, she can't really move, she sometimes couldn't even talk. What do I do?
Mm-hmm.
And so this is another thing that parents really want in a parenting strategy. They want to know, what do I do when this is happening?
Right.
And so the work has been very much about, what do we do during these tough times? And so stay listening is about, in that moment, believing that the child is suffering, setting limits so that they don't hurt themselves or hurt anyone else during that time.
Right.
That's crucial. And then caring for them as they are. The emotions are pouring out, whether it's a kind of more of a typical looking tantrum, or whether it looks like it's something, and now I'll introduce this word, sensory assault,
Mm-hmm.
where to me it looked like my child was being assaulted from the inside out with some type of sensation. The sensation was overwhelming her, and it was really horrible for her, and she could not stop it. And of course, this is what we hear over and over again.
Sure.
They can't stop it. There's nothing I can do to stop it. We can't teach it out of them.
Right.
So, and there's a lot of modification that's required usually for a child who's over-responsive, because gentle touch can add to sensory overwhelm. If a parent moves closer to offer warmth, and eye contact, that can be even add sensory input. To move too far away can add the fear of abandonment.
Mm-hmm.
So, what is kind of just right enough for that moment for the parent to be present and to basically, I'm here to listen, provide safety, and we'll get through this together.
Right.
So even the listening to the emotions and the limit setting. So limit setting is the third tool
Mm-hmm.
we've gone through four now. Limit setting is the fourth tool that it's all based in listening well to
Mhm.
children, and that's how connection is.
Well, and it's validating their experience too, right? I mean, by
Absolutely.
staying in connection, um, we find with just in parents understanding that, just as you described, that the behavior is the result of a phenomena that is so distressing that they're coping, that they are in such an autonomic nervous system fight or flight response, that there is no logical thinking or talking through at that moment. It is pure, sympathetic nervous system. And, understanding that is the first step. The next step is, how do I keep myself safe? How do I keep my child safe? Um, and as you said, effectively communicate that I'm here no matter what, and we're going to get through it.
That's right. That's right. And
Um,
right in there sometimes is this kind of painful ambivalence about if I'm holding my child with a gentle hold so that they can't swing around and bite me again, or kick me, or whatever it is that they're dysregulated and they're
right.
good through and through, but they are frightened and lashing out. So a lot of times, I mean, that's just, I mention it because it's a struggle for parents to do that hold. And if your child is yelling, you're hurting me, which is very common, right? And it may feel like the pressure, even if it's a very light hold, just kind of keeping arms from flapping around, it can feel like it's painful.
Hmm.
So, it's that, again, it's that fine line, as soon as your body can relax a little bit, I'll relax my arms a little bit too. So I think trust is built over time
Hmm.
that um, I'm not here to hurt you. I'm sorry it's hard right now. It matters to me how we feel together.
Hmm.
So that's what's happening here.
Right, right.
That's the main thing that's happening here. And there's kind of all kinds of variations, and I will try to support parents to set limits um, in the most controlled environment that they can, because we don't always have the option to do this kind of beautiful holding while a child offloads. Sometimes you just have to pick them up and get them across the street, right? And
Yeah.
it doesn't look so pretty. But that's what safety first looks like in that situation,
Yes.
right?
How is there a set number of sessions that you have? Is it the same people in a group over time, or do people come in and out? What does it logistically sort of look like?
Well, I start with a starter group, and it's 6 weeks, no more than six parents in a group, because in every group except for the first one, which is the starting point, and kind of the introduction, uh, I introduce a new tool. So after that, there's one tool per week,
Gotcha.
and and in addition to introducing the tools, um, I want to know how, when you tried it last week, how did it go? How
Hmm.
was it to do that stay listening? Was it horrible? Did you feel guilty? Did it feel helpful? Did your child have an insight afterwards, which is lovely when that happens?
Sure,
Um, and no, people don't come and go because intimacy grows over time.
sure. And
And
trust
people,
within the group.
that's right. That's right. And emotion flows out more easily for the parents when they have a feeling of containment. So
Hmm.
what would happen over time in the groups is that some people would want to stay. They'd say, okay, well, that was great. I need to hear that one more time. Can I stay for another 6 weeks? Sure. So then, people would stay as long as they would need to, but at the beginning of the 6 weeks, that's the group for that 6 weeks.
Right.
And then the other thing that can happen, and that does happen for me, is that the parents who have um, very complex, medically challenged, genetically compromised children, lots of variations, and or have very complex trauma backgrounds themselves
Hmm.
and need more time in that territory, they would move into individual therapy.
Gotcha.
And then that was just a beautiful direction and a starting point of a common frame of reference that we had going into a longer term treatment. But many parents would kind of come in for the 6-week group. It's like, okay, good. I've got it. I've tried it. I have a map
Hmm.
of what I want to do now.
Yeah.
And when I don't feel very, in sync with my kid, I know what to do. I'm going to do special time and I'm going to do play listening, which I haven't told you about. This is the last
Oh,
tool.
yeah. I'd love to hear that.
And play listening is particularly thrilling for us because occupational therapy strategies that we come home to try can be incorporated into play listening. So, for example, when my daughter was angry at me for one reason or another, I, name name the
Right.
reason.
If you're
There
a
are so many,
You are
right?
the
Right,
object of anger.
right. That's right. I'm the
Well,
sturdy one. Let me have it. We would. I'd say, okay, well, let's go do some play listening. You can tell me how mad you are at me. So I would incorporate the OT tools that we were using at the time. So I would get into, for example, in between two gigantic pillows, giant foam ones. So like kind of like a sandwich, and I was the meat. And she would do her jumping on her trampoline, and I'd be kind of laying on my side looking at her going, wow, you're really so good at the jumping. And then she would fly up and crash onto the top pillow and yell that she was mad at me. And then we would both laugh. And so she's telling me she's mad at me. She's getting a lot of proprioceptive input. We're connecting with laughter about how good she is about expressing her anger at me. And I'm going, oh, in the pillows, but not getting hurt at all. So it
Yeah.
was just win, 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 win all the way around.
Oh, that's
So
great.
that's play listening, building connection through laughter.
Yeah. And so, but when you were focused on sort of the anger piece, I was curious if this was a global sense, or do you encourage kids and parents to be very specific? Like, I was angry when you took my mashed potatoes away. I wasn't finished eating, or when we didn't get to go to the playground, or is it better to be specific or general, or it doesn't matter?
If they can be specific, that's fantastic. But usually kids have to work towards that, right?
Yeah, and this is not something that's done in the fit of anger. It's done afterwards. Like, remember when you were mad about this? Let's do our play listening around that. I mean,
Sometimes in my experience, the younger the child is, the less they want to go back and think about it. It's kind of like they've had their emotional poop and they don't want to muck around in it.
right.
Right? It's like, I feel better now. I had my, you know, I was mad at you. Um, but certainly, I always wanted to have my children, and I support parents to, if they say you took my mashed potatoes and I didn't want you to, or you put cheese on them and I didn't want you to, and I'm really mad, if they can articulate that, I generally, the pat line is, thank you for telling me,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
Thank you for telling me. Then we're having a conversation. But if, and then, if you want to go back and say, oh, what about those mashed potatoes? I'm laying in my sandwich there in between the two pillows. Oh yeah, what about those mashed potatoes? That's another job about those mashed potatoes. So it turns into fun,
Yeah.
that the anger is connecting.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that sounds like just a lovely way for them to express themselves, but still be in connection and in relationship.
And get their proprioceptive working.
Right. Exactly.
It's really good.
So I just want to just shift gears for a minute, and because I don't want to run out of time, but I do feel like the information that you gathered, and while it doesn't have to be definitive right now, since I know you're working on the analyses and the manuscript, but just what the survey was about and why you were sort of drawn to it, and what you think it might, reveal to contribute to the literature.
Well, thank you for asking about this. This is, I really had the experience that my daughter was suffering, that she was really in pain some of the time, not all of the time, but some of the time. And the more I talk to parents, different parents over the last decade, um, some children are expressing even in more pain with sensory dysregulation than my daughter was. So I started to just become curious. How many of our kids are in true pain, not just uncomfortable or pressure or I'm unhappy because I didn't get what I want, but really feeling pain like you would if you skinned your knee or you broke your leg, or I'm not sure that because I haven't had that, but this is what I became curious about, was what are the children experiencing?
And these are particularly children with sensory over-responsivity. Is that correct?
Correct.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
those are the parents who seek me out. Just That's a good question.
That, most of those parents that you work with have children who have sensory over-responsivity.
Yes,
Okay.
that's right. That's right. And I feel that that's more my since it's my lived experience. I understand the life of that better um, than other types
Gotcha.
of sensory dysregulation. Um, so I just invited parents. So there a person in San Francisco whose name is Julia Martin started an online support group, chat group called
Mhm.
Sensory Integration Kids in San Francisco. Um, and grew very quickly, where a lot of parents got online and talked a lot about, nobody wants to be our friend, and it's so horrible, and a teacher said this to us, or just basically having a place to vent. So
Yes.
this was the group that I also drafted along with as I was raising my daughter, and so this was the group that I invited to take this survey. So
Hmm.
it was an anonymous survey, and just a tidbit about it was that um, is that we found that there are a certain percentage, not all. I kind of expected more, but that's why we ask other people, that a small percentage, maybe 25%, that's not that small, of kids really do have pain um, with sensory dysregulation. And so what is the point of that information? In my mind, the point is that it helps me think about taking it more seriously. I invite parents to consider that, it's not kind of an overreaction. It is, even if it's an over-responsivity, it's still a true reaction. And that where a parent would offer compassion if you broke your leg, they wouldn't try to kind of teach you out of that moment or how to regulate in that moment. They would offer compassion and care.
Right.
And that since parents are the ones who are often teaching educators how they want the educators to respond to their children in those situations in the
Right.
classroom, that the teachers need to know this is a real thing and you need to take her or him seriously here while providing safety and containment.
Yeah, and I think you once explained it to me, um, that just sort of hit home because pain is a different experience than just discomfort.
Mhm.
People, those labels connote very different things to people, because when you have discomfort you may have a stomach ache, so it hurts but you go on with life.
Uh-huh.
If you have an appendicitis and you're in pain, you
Mhm.
you can't move, and that kind of distinction, I think, is a really valuable one for people to hold, because it does impact the way they respond to the individual.
Right. And then the last layer on that is that if a child is expressing a need, a fear, a concern, a pain response, kind of over and over again as their neurology develops, and the parent is dismissive because, you know, they have been received the information, well, ignore that,
Right.
or distract them away from that, or teach them now to go to their quiet corner. The child will over and over again feel dismissed,
Hmm.
and that will disrupt the attachment relationship
Right.
and the child's ultimate capacity to feel competent in themselves, knowing themselves going forward.
Yeah.
So that's what we really want to try to catch and support parents to have other tools and strategies to use in those moments.
Yeah, and that's the beauty of the program that you have to offer
Mhm.
them.
Mhm.
Wow, this has been so enlightening. I'm so grateful for you to taking the time today to share this information. I think it's incredibly relevant to all of us in the field because we're all dealing with the child within the context of the family and really trying to address all of their needs. And I think having a mental health team within an OT practice is really a critical component that a lot of therapists, if they don't have access to that, it's something that would be really valuable to look for in their area.
Uh-huh. Yeah, no, I think it's the model that you have is really beautiful. And thank you for doing the work that you do. I mean that with all my heart.
Thank you. All right. Well, it's been a pleasure. I look forward to the next time that we get to talk.
Thanks. Thanks for inviting me to join you.